Hello, good day. Today is Friday, February the 26th. Yes, February is over. And today the subject is British imperialism, particularly in India. Britain's Britain's occupation of India is a classic example of what imperialism, how it was supposed to work. The British literally made money in India coming and going. They, for example, took over, and the British imperialism in India, once again, just like the imperialism in Nigeria, it was run by a British company, the British East India Company, with the support of the British government, because a lot of the members of British Parliament were also giant stockholders in the British East India Company. And so the British, of course, took over all the best lands in India. And in India, the British produced cash crops, cotton, the big one, but another crop that we're going to talk about a little later called opium. Yeah, we'll get to that. It's one of those dirty little secrets. It is why the British, and forgive me, it is why the British pictures, thank you. I've got it here somewhere. Oh, come on, Horton. Don't waste our time. I'm sorry. I have that here. You're making me mad, Horton. I really try to catalog these pictures. I've got it somewhere. I know I do. Oh, well, I'll get that later. It is why there are two visions of what Britain, there are two visions of what Britain is supposed to look like. The British version, and to be honest, the American version. And then there is the way that the rest of the world looked at the British traditionally. And trust me, there's miles of difference between the two. I'm going to pause and I'm going to find that picture. So I'll be back. Yes, I'm back. Thank you for waiting. Actually, you're not waiting, but thank you. I found it. Yeah. And what I'm about to show you is a picture that I found on Facebook. I found in the Facebook page of my fellow history teachers. But this picture, I'm about to show you a picture. On the left is the way the British, and by and large the Americans, depict Great Britain throughout history. On the right is the way the rest of the world has seen Great Britain. For your approval. Yes, quite the contrast. Britain in British history books, Britain in everybody else's history books, except for the United States. And so, yeah, I like that depiction. And it's pretty accurate. So let's talk about British occupation of India, shall we? So, the crown jewel of the British Empire was India until 1947. In 1757, Sir Robert Clive led the British to a decisive victory over the French at the Battle of Plessy. And this happened in Britain. I'm sorry. in India, which solidified British control over the collapsing Mughal dynasty. The Mughals were a series of rulers who ruled most of India for several hundred years. They were Muslims, and the word Mughal comes from the fact that many people in India thought they were Mongols. But anyway, they were the old rulers. The British came in, modern weapons, and suddenly the Mughals are out and Britain is in. And Britain, as it says, like in Nigeria, India was ruled not so much by the British government, but by the British East India Tea Company. Yeah, the British wanted tea. Although actually the tea they wanted was not to be found in India, it was to be found in China. We'll get to that later. The area that was controlled by the company continued to grow. This is economic imperialism. Ah, yes, sepoys. Sepoys were, the British, this is economic imperialism. Yeah, there were British soldiers stationed in India, but more so, there were sepoys. Sepoys are Indian soldiers served in the British Army in India. So basically, they got these sepoys to rule India for them, to do all the dirty work of beating the people of India into shape. How valuable was India to the British Empire? Tremendous raw materials. Cotton, rice, tea, and once again, I didn't mention opium, but we'll get to it. 300 million potential customers. The population of the United States right now is about 350 million. The population of India in the 19th century was already 300 million and growing in leaps and bounds. And these are 300 potential customers. And here's the thing. The British grew cotton. Indians picked the cotton. The British owned the cotton. They took the cotton back to Manchester or in other cities, turned it into garments, and then shipped the garments back to all over the world and to India to sell it. Now, in fact, the British law forbid the Indian people from spinning and weaving their own cloth, a technique that Indians had been using since the Stone Age, of making their own clothing. No, can't do it anymore. Got to buy British clothing. Salt, same thing. For thousands of years, the Indian people had been either mining or collecting their own salt from the ocean. It's a very simple process, by the way. Well, the British outlawed that. You had to now buy British salt with a British tax on it. And of course, the plantation system. Tea, indigo, which is a dye for coloring fabric, coffee, cotton, and jute, and wait for it, this stuff, opium. What is opium? Opium is a substance that is derived from the poppy plant. Come on. Have you ever seen scene from The Wizard of Oz where I would like to show up, but I don't have time. So Dorothy is going to the Emerald City. She has with her, of course, Toto, who is a living, breathing animal. She has with her the lion, Cowardly Lion, who is a living, breathing animal. But she also has the Tin Man, who doesn't really breathe or have senses, as well as Scarecrow, same thing. And so the Wicked Witch of the West does not want Dorothy to get to see the Wizard of Oz. She wants to hinder her in her journey. And so what does she do? There's this big field between Dorothy and the Emerald City, and the Wicked Witch of the West causes poppies to grow. And as Dorothy and her crew make their way across this giant field of poppies, they fall asleep. Why? Because of what's in the poppies. What's in the Poppies is a substance called opium. Opium comes from the flower of the poppy. You take the flowers, you dry them out, you grind them up, and the earliest usage of opium was that it was smoked. Of course, you can make it into a powder. Um, the most in this country, the most common form of opiates is Oxycontin. Opium, it has many, many medical uses. Ask me how I know. I know because I've used it prescription wise. That's an interesting story. Yeah. Um, when I first came here to teach, it was like my second, third year. The year was 2010, and in 2010, that was when the building was smaller. And I remember that day. It was December the 9th. It was a Thursday, winter day. And I had finished up what I did for the day and had a conversation with my department chair about one thing or the other. Got in back then I drove a white van. Yeah, I drove a white van, and yeah, I drove a white van. We'll look at that again later. But I drove a white van, and I was going north on 27, on 42. Sorry, I just came out of the old Kroger, not the new one, the old one, and I was making my way up that slight hill. Um, there's a Starbucks right there now. And I remember, as you drive, and I was driving, there are two lanes to go one way and two lanes to go the other, and there's a middle lane for turning all down that highway. And so I was driving, and I remember, and I was in the second right lane. I was next to the turn lane, but I was driving. And you know how you drive, you have peripheral vision, you see things. And I remember seeing that cresting the hill was a truck. Blue, I think, Chevy Tahoe. And what made me notice it was that truck's going pretty fast. The speed limit was like 40 something through there, maybe 35. And this truck was going fast. But of course, truck's over there. In fact, it's in the far right, the far left lane from me, the farthest lane from me. And I went, okay, not my problem. Glance back, truck's still going very fast. Only this time it's in the next lane, close to the center. Not my problem. And then I glance again. Now the truck is in the left turn lane, still going fast. Then I look again, and this truck is now barreling straight down the road at me. And you got to remember, this transpires in seconds. Yeah, it's literally seconds. And so, people have always said that when people are in such a crisis, because I was going to be head-on collision. I was going to be, and there was no avoiding it. I was driving down the road one way. This Tahoe was barreling down the road the other. And, it was going to hit me. Head-on collision, two vehicles. And they say that, your life passes before your eyes, when things like that happen. Near-death experiences. And so I remember exactly what I thought. I thought, this is going to hit me, and it is just going to be one big mess. There's going to be insurance, and I'm going to have to repair my van, and and all. I might have to miss school, and that's what I thought. And and I slowed down, slowed down. In fact, I probably was at a complete stop by the time of the collision. And being a chicken, in fact, I was wearing a gray fleece just like this, and threw up my arms because I was scared. Threw up my arms, which was probably a good thing. It was a very good thing, very fortuitous, and I closed my eyes. Also, a very good thing. And the next thing I remember is a sickening, just a metal bang, and then feeling like my entire body was all being squeezed at once, and I really didn't feel any pain. In fact, the only pain that I felt was, as you're in a vehicle, particularly a van, your feet go up under the steering wheel, all that assembly up in there. There are wires and this, that, and the other. Both my knees were jammed up into that, and that hurt. And so going this way, and when that collision happened, he hit me like this, and so my van did a complete 270-degree turn. In other words, I was facing this way. Now I'm facing that way. Actually, that way. And I opened my eyes and I said, "Come on, come on, just breathe, just breathe." I started taking little sips of air because, yeah, it'd been knocked out of me. The seatbelt, the collision, the force. And I remember opening my eyes and seeing a little puff of smoke come out of the airbag. And I do remember that my knees hurt because, there had cuts in them. One of them had my right knee had a cut in it the size of a quarter, about a quarter-inch deep, 25 stitches. My left knee had to have 15 stitches. That was the pain I was in. And, at that point in time, now we look. At that point in time, this woman came down, and a firefighter's next to her, and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "By the way, that's the truck. It was gray. It had flipped. It landed on the hood of this car and just skittered down the highway." I said, "Yeah, I'm hurt though." And so they couldn't get this door open manually. They eventually had to get the jaws of life. They opened this door, and I remember the fireman said, everybody that came there said, "Can you move your feet? Can you move your feet?" And I'd sit there and have to tap my feet over and over again for them. And then asked the fireman, I said, "Tell me something. That was a kid driving out of the vehicle, wasn't it?" I knew it was a kid. It was a kid, wasn't it? And I was right. I said, and I was like, "Get me out of here. Me and that kid are going to talk." And they said, "You just, you stay where you are." And so, yeah, they had to come and they used the jaws of life and opened the car door. They cut off the car door, strapped me onto a gurney, and put me in the back of an ambulance, where I spent the next 6 days in the hospital. And during that time, now we get to the point of the story, and during that time, they gave me this opium, Oxycontin, prescription. Took it, I forget how many times a day, twice maybe. Um, and got out of the hospital, stayed home through Christmas break. I remember Mr. Turner came to visit me when I was laying there in the emergency room. And I was like, "Oh, Mr. Turner, don't worry. I'll be back in school tomorrow." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, sure, sure. If not, on Monday. This is fine." Well, it turns out I had 6 broken ribs, 3 on this side, 3 on this side. And the pattern of the break went right across here, followed my seatbelt. Seatbelt did what it was supposed to. It broke my ribs, yeah, but it also kept me from flying through the windshield. I remember that my coat had burns on it. Yeah, those collision bags, they're a good invention, but they have hazards as well. What causes those bags to inflate so quickly is an explosion. And I had burns all in my coat, fortunately, not on me. A lot of people get burns in their face. But I spent the next 6 days in the hospital. recuperating, then went home. And of course, when I went home, I was still um, taking taking Oxycontin, prescription Oxycontin. And, I began to feel better and better. And eventually, January 3rd, I came back here to Ross, started teaching again. And I was still under the doctor's prescription for Oxycontin. And the first day, everything was fine. The second day, I was in such a rush to get here that I forgot to take my Oxycontin. And, I said, I'm fine. I came in here, taught, and all during the day, I was like, I mean, is anybody else hot in here? It is so hot in here. Man, if somebody open a window and not 15 minutes later, I'll be saying, oh man, it is freezing in here. I'm so cold. And that went on all day. And eventually, at the end of the day, of course, just back then, I used to do the after school bus duty. So at the end of my day, I'm walking up to the office to do my bus duty, basically stand upstairs in the lobby. And I started feeling really sick. And I barely made it into there's a bathroom in the office before I just cacked. I just launched. And so, I mean, I was like, oh man. And so I called the doctor and I said, my doctor, I said, oh man, you guys got to see me. There's something wrong with me. All day long I've been hot, and then I've been cold, and I've been dizzy, and I just threw up. I am sick. And they said, well, okay, what medicines are you taking? I said, oh, you don't have to worry about that. I had a prescription for Oxycontin, but it's okay. I didn't take it today. And the nurse just stopped and she said, you're going through withdrawal. I mean, what I was doing, once your body gets that opium, it likes it. Not only does it like it, the way you like ice cream, but it likes it to where it says, I gotta have that. It's a physical addiction. And if you don't answer that body's physical addiction, your body does funky stuff to you. And for me, it was funky stuff. For a lot of people, I never believed a lot of these actors and athletes who said, I got addicted to prescription painkillers, and that's why I said those guys are liars. They're just losers. No. Opium, opioids. Yeah, if you take those, and many people do, many people have to. If you take those, you have to be so careful because once your body gets used to that, when you try to go away from it, your body's gonna, it's gonna say no, and it will. In fact, it can be deadly. People have died going cold turkey. It's dangerous. And so what I had to do, they at first I was taking this much opium, my normal dose, and then they began to say, okay, just take this much, and they gave me another drug that was not an opiate, and over time, until I was no longer on the other drug. So, but yeah, yeah. Now, and that's what the British were growing. And you say, well, why would they grow that? Well, a number of people in Britain did use it. It was a great painkiller. For example, Edgar Allan Poe was addicted to something called laudanum. You say, what's laudanum? Oh, you take Scotch whiskey and then you pour powdered opium into it. Yeah. But the British actually manufactured it to sell to the Chinese. And we'll talk about the Opium Wars later on. But yeah, keep that in mind. The British manufactured processed opium to sell to somebody else. The British were one of the greatest drug dealers, opium dealers in the history of this planet. Anyway, where are we at? What were the effects of the British rule of India? One thing the British did do was to end something called the Thuggee cult. You say, now what's the Thuggee cult? The Thuggee cult was this cult in India. If you've ever seen, not this Indiana Jones picture, but Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the second Indiana Jones film, which I like it, okay, but the Thuggee cult was a real thing. And the Thuggees were murderers who had a specific way of murdering people. In fact, they considered murder to be part of their religion. They would befriend a person, and then when the person wasn't looking, they would use a garrote. A garrote is simply a wire. You have two sticks, you have a sharp wire between them, and then when they're not looking, you whip that over their head. You then slam your knee in the back to crush the spine and yank. Instant ragdoll. And that was their specialty, their trademark. The British wiped them out. And also the practice of the suttee. Now, the suttee is an interesting British practice. In Indian tradition, before the British, they had the practice of the suttee. Say, what's that? Well, when a woman would marry a gentleman, and that gentleman dies, it was considered, well, the duty of the woman to throw herself on the funeral pyre. See, in India, they don't bury people. They burn their bodies. Burn their bodies and then pour the ashes into the Ganges River, the river of life. Pardon me. Well, part of that would happen would be that the wife would perform the suttee. She'd throw herself on the fire, killing herself. Why not? Because in Indian culture, she had nowhere to go. She belonged to her husband, and her husband's now dead. She has nowhere to go. What was the result of, and oh yes, the British also ended the practice of female infanticide. Please tell me you can put those two words together. Female, obviously. Infanticide. Now, if you just cut the word there, infant, and aside, it means killing of infant children. Female infant children. Why? Because female infants were a burden economically. And the British ended that. So, what was the result of all these things? Well, one of the results of the British doing this was a population explosion in a country that was already overpopulated, a country where starvation was a common thing. Population of India exploded. Reduction of food supply because the British conducting of cash crops caused famines. Racism and cultural imperialism. You see that cultural imperialism. Christian missionaries were brought into India to convert Indians to Christianity. Had a lot of success. However, on the other hand, the world's third largest network of railroads was built in India. Western sanitation, although it is worth mentioning that India has the largest number of people that do not have access to indoor toilet facilities. I could go off and talk about that forever. For example, I watched this one documentary with Jane Goodall. I think that's her name. She traveled down the Ganges River and she visited an Indian city, and she walked down alleyways and streets, and she said it was just like a minefield of dog, cow, and human waste. But the British opened Western Schools University. Yes. Let's begin with the Sepoy Rebellion tomorrow, shall we? Sepoy Rebellion. I think that's a good place to stop, boys and girls. And so, yes.